All right, we will go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all so much for joining. We're here today for the information session for the Anonymous Was a Woman Environmental Art Grants Program. My name is Audrey Tauberger. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be guiding us through this presentation and also a Q&A. I'm a senior program officer at the New York Foundation for the Arts, or NYFA, and today's session will be recorded. We will be posting it on NYFA's website on the Anonymous Was a Woman Environmental Art Grant page on our website, and it will be under information sessions. That will be posted within a week of today's session. It will also have closed captioning. And I will be supported today by a couple of NYFA staff members. I'm supported by Raina, who will be dropping helpful links in the chat as well as helping me with the Q&A, and then also Sarah, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Audrey. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah O'Connell, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of NYFA Grants. Before I pass it back over to Audrey to give the main presentation on the program you're here to learn about today, I thought I'd just talk briefly about NYFA's other programs and offerings for those of you who are learning about us today. So first we have our awards and grants programs. NYFA distributes over 5.5 million through 15 different grant programs each year. The AWAW EAG is one of those programs. And we offer unrestricted, project-based, and emergency grant programs to artists and arts organizations based in New York City, New York State, and also some that are nationwide, like this program. Next, we have fiscal sponsorship. So this allows individual artists and emerging arts organizations to raise funds using NYFA's 501c3 tax exempt status. This opens up possibilities to access funding that otherwise wouldn't be available to an individual without fiscal sponsorship. And we accept applications to this program on a quarterly basis. Next, we have our learning department, which offers a wide range of professional development opportunities for artists and arts administrators. These programs range from career advice and coaching, online workshops, and leadership initiative programs. And then lastly is a bit of a two-parter is our online resources. The main offering here is the NYFA Classifieds, where we share jobs in the arts, artist opportunities, as well as studio and space rentals. And then more recently, we've added a volunteer portal, which is a free portal where nonprofits and cultural workers can share volunteer opportunities. And then the other part of our online resources are our emergency resources, which is just a centralized list of emergency resources for artists across the U.S. that extend beyond what NYFA is able to offer. So yeah, I think Raina has been adding links to all those in the chat, but please feel free to check them out after this presentation. And I'll pass it back over. Oh, and then also I'll mostly be offline for the rest of the presentation, just helping on the back end. I might pop back on during the Q&A, but otherwise I'll pass it back to Audrey for the rest.
Thank you. Okay, a bit of an agenda for today. We will start by going over a grant overview and eligibility for the program. Then we'll talk about how to apply, and then the application questions and tips. So actually going through what's on the application form, and then the evaluation and selection process. And then we'll end in a Q&A. For the Q&A, you can drop your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom. It's typically at the bottom of your Zoom screen and has a question mark icon and says Q&A. Feel free to add questions throughout the presentation that might come up. We just ask that you wait until I cover a specific question section that you might have a question on in case I do go over it then. But after the presentation, we'll open it up to answer your questions. Okay, a program overview. The Anonymous Was a Woman Environmental Art Grants, also referred to as AWAG, provides grants of up to $20,000 to environmental art projects led by women, transgender, and gender nonconforming artists in the United States and U.S. territories. The applications are currently open and they close on Tuesday, April 7th, 2026 at 5 p.m. Eastern. And just to note, the application form closes at 5 p.m. Eastern, so please give yourself ample time to submit before that time because we are not able to give extensions, and that is a hard deadline. Also, for this cycle, the program will distribute $470,000 in funding. And this program is made possible by Anonymous Was a Woman with additional funding provided by individual donors. So we thank them for their support of this program. All right, before applying, it's important to make sure that you yourself are eligible to apply as a lead applicant, as well that your project is eligible for this program. So starting with eligibility for lead applicants must identify as a woman, transgender, and/or gender nonconforming artist. They must be 18 years or older on or before the grant deadline, and that deadline's Tuesday, April 7th. They must have residence in one of the 50 states, a tribal nation, a U.S. territory, or the District of Columbia on the grant deadline. The lead applicant must have residence in the U.S. or U.S. territories, but the project itself can happen anywhere in the world, even outside of the U.S. Also, applicants must not be enrolled in a degree-seeking program of any kind during the grant term, which would be August 2026 through August 2027. You also must be an individual artist who is the project lead of the proposed project. So collaborative projects are eligible and encouraged to apply, and I'll talk in a little bit about what that looks like on the application itself. But the lead applicant must meet all of the eligibility requirements. Collaborators on the project do not necessarily need to fill the eligibility requirements. So this means they can be living outside of the US. Maybe they're a scientist rather than an artist, or maybe they identify in some way outside of the eligibility requirements. That is totally fine as long as the lead applicant meets all of these requirements. You must also not have received a AWAG award previously as the lead applicant. This is a one-time grant. If you have received the grant before as lead applicant, you can be a collaborator on another project, but you cannot apply again as a lead applicant. Okay. Project eligibility for this program. Projects can be working within any artistic discipline. It can also be an interdisciplinary project, but all disciplines are welcome. Projects must have a focus on environmental issues, and the intended impact of the project is an important part of the review and selection process. Also, this program is seeking to advance existing projects that are already in development. The funded project or phase of the project must be completed by August 2027. So again, projects must be in process at the time of applying. Also, projects must have a public engagement component that is free to attend and takes place within the grant term, which again is August 2026 through August 2027. Okay, how to apply. Again, the applications are currently open, so you can start your application today. Applicants must create a Submittable account. We accept all of our applications through Submittable. So if you don't have one already, you'll have to create an account, which is free to do. Before you gain access to the actual application itself, you'll be taken to an eligibility form, which you'll have to answer the questions for to make sure that you are eligible for the program. Once you do that, then you'll be taken to the actual application form and you can start filling out the application. You can always start and then save your application as a draft and then come back to it if you're not ready to submit all at once. But then once you are ready, please click submit, which will be at the bottom of the screen. Once it's submitted, you'll receive an email confirmation just letting you know that we did receive your application. Make sure you receive this email just to make sure everything went through. Sometimes it goes to spam, so also check there if you're not immediately seeing it. There are no extensions for this program, so again, please make sure you're applying before the deadline, which is Tuesday, April 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And once you submit your application, you will no longer be able to make edits or changes to your application. So make sure it's in its full form when you are ready to submit. And then lastly, we again receive all of our applications through the Submittable form, so we're not able to accept any hard copies or applications over email. Next, we'll talk through the application form and the contents on the application. The application consists of lead applicant information. This will again be the person who fulfills all of the eligibility requirements. It will ask for your address, and this address should be your current residence, which is in the U.S. or U.S. territories. And that it will also include your email. This is the email we will contact you with the results of your application. So make sure it's an email that's active and that you are checking on a regular basis. There will also be a space for artist and collective information, project information, work samples, your project budget, an optional supplemental materials section, and then it will end in applicant demographics. The applicant demographics is for internal purposes only, so it won't be part of the review process and will not be available for panelists to view, but it's only for internal reporting purposes. And all answers will be kept confidential. Okay, artist and collective information. This section is for collecting general information about the artist, collective, or collaboration applying to the AWAW EAG. To be eligible, you need to provide documentation of a sustained commitment to your art practice by answering the following questions. So first, you'll be asked to identify if you're applying as an individual artist or a collective or collaboration. NYFA defines a collaboration of up to 3 artists. And then if you do select collective or collaboration, you'll have a place to put the name of your collective or collaboration, as well as define collaborator roles. For that section, we don't need to know every person who's involved in the project along the way, but just the people who are the main collaborators and creators of the project. The next question will be an artist statement / mission. This is where you can give a concise statement, giving an overview of your artistic practice or your collective's mission. In this statement, you can give a brief introduction to the ideas, themes, and methods in your practice. We like to say that the artist statement can answer how you make what you make and why you make what you make. Also, this statement should reflect the ideas and inspiration relevant to the submitted work samples and the proposed project goals. So it should align with the work that you are submitting with, as well as the themes present in your project. You'll then be asked to select the artistic discipline that your work is. This will not be part of the review process at all. It just helps us internally know what kind of projects are being applied with. So please just pick the artistic discipline that you think best reflects your practice and your work. But again, that won't affect the way your application is reviewed. There will also be an optional place for you to include your artist's website or maybe your collective or collaboration's website. Okay, project information. So this program is a project grant, and the projects must take place from August 2026 to August 2027. We have a series of questions that will relate to your project and how your project meets the eligibility criteria to engage your audience with public engagement activities. So for this section, we will start by asking your project's name and then asking for a short project synopsis or a description of the phase of the project that you're applying with. So to apply, you must be applying with a kind of distinct project. We understand that with environmental art projects, your project might be ongoing and might not have a specific end date. If that applies to your project, you can also apply with a distinct phase of your project. There'll be a place for you to mark what you're applying with. And if you're applying with a distinct phase, we'll ask for you to describe that phase. And then it's also important that you are still having a public engagement that's happening during the grant term. So then we'll ask for you to describe your proposed public engagement. Projects are required to have a public engagement component by August 31st, 2027. The public engagement must be free to attend, open to the general public, and be completed within the grant term in order to receive full funding. Online events are acceptable as long as they are attended by a live audience. So for example, you could have a Zoom event where attendees are attending live. You would not be able to have an online maybe web offering or anything that is asynchronous that there's no live attended audience for. It would have to be an online event with a live audience. Public engagements can really look like anything that brings your project to the public sphere. This can look like screenings, exhibitions, performances, lectures, panel discussions, or any other kind of community event. And for this is just a proposal. We understand that plans are tentative and things might change, but we'd like for you to outline your proposal for the public engagement in this question. More questions for the project information. There's a question on project milestones. This question should answer how far along in the development is your project. And we ask that you clearly outline 1 to 3 milestones your project has already reached thus far. So these should reflect the progress of your project to date. Then we have the project timeline. So what is the project's production and presentation timeline through the grant term? Here we ask that you describe the steps necessary to complete your project or phase of the project and list the anticipated dates of each step. This section should clarify how and when you will make your project. And also please be sure to include any anticipated dates for your public engagement component. And again, we know that dates are subject to change, but this should just be an outline of your timeline. You can organize this timeline in any way you'd like. You can do it by months. You can add in specific dates, whichever makes most sense for your project. You then have a question about environmental and social impact. So describe the intended environmental impact of your project, the location and or community it will affect, and how you plan to achieve this impact. So here we ask for you to describe the intended life cycle of your project, the ethical priorities of your project, and the ways in which your project attempts to reduce environmental harm. Also, it's important to be thinking about where your resources for your project have come from. And when considering the materials used within your project, it's important to prioritize sustainability, ensure that they are non-extractive and ethically sourced. And then the last question we have about your project is the target audience and outreach strategy. So here, please tell us who your target audience is and what your plans to reach and engage them are. You can also talk if you are already in conversation with this audience and what your relationship is. But yeah, who your project is intending to reach and how you intend to reach them. Okay, next we get to work samples. If you have applied to this program in the past, the work samples look slightly different this year. For this year, applicants can submit up to 6 work samples total. Work samples can include images, PDF project presentations, manuscripts, audio, and or short video clips. You can also do a combination of all of the above. And the work samples are divided into 2 categories. We have the proposed project work samples, where you must submit 1 to 3 in-progress samples from your proposed project. So these are work samples that are coming directly from the project that you're applying with, and these should be in process. And you can submit 1 to 3. At least 1 is required for a proposed project work sample. The next is supporting work samples. This is optional, but you may submit up to 3 additional samples that provide context for your work and or project. So this can be from other projects from the one you're proposing, maybe they're completed, that give context for your work as an artist, and also maybe your project as a whole as well. Some overall guidelines for work samples are that at least 1 work sample must be an in-progress work from your proposed project. So that's the main requirement for the work samples, is that you're submitting at least 1 for an in-progress work from your project. Also, all submitted work samples must be created by the applicant and or project collaborators. So all the work samples must be either from the lead artist or the collaborators on the project. For that reason, curators are not eligible to apply as lead applicants because the work must be coming directly from the artists applying. And then also promotional videos, reels, and or interactive websites are not eligible for online experiences or simulations, or video recording of the work in action is acceptable. And here we have some guidelines on the work sample submission options. So for each of the sections I mentioned, you can submit either uploads only. This would be up to 3 files, or you can submit 1 audio and video link plus up to 2 uploads. So essentially, you can be submitting uploads, and then you can also submit up to 1 link for each section. I have listed here the accepted formats that we allow for file uploads. You can submit docs, PDFs, JPEGs, PNGs, MP3s, and MP4s. For links, you can be submitting YouTube links, Vimeo links, Dropbox, Google Drive, Bandcamp, or SoundCloud. The length limits for each of your work samples for manuscripts, you can be submitting up to 5 pages each. For PDF project presentations, they can be up to 5 pages each as well. And please do not include links on either your manuscript or PDF project presentation. And then for audio or video work samples, you can be submitting up to 5 minutes each, with a maximum of 10 minutes across all work samples. For the audio and video, if your work sample is above the 5-minute mark, you can also provide timestamps for a maximum of 5 minutes that you would like the panel to review. Also, if you're submitting links and it's password protected, please make sure to include the passwords on the application, and also make sure all of your links are accessible up until August of this year, so that the panel is able to access all of your work samples throughout the review. And then the last thing I'll talk about for the application is the project budget. So applicants are required to submit an overall project budget. We provide a template, which we just put in the chat. It's also linked on the application. You can use this template if you would like. You can also use your own budget. Either one is completely fine. If you use our template, you'll just have to make a copy, and then you can start putting in your information. And you'll also be asked to indicate your total grant request. This is the total dollar amount that you're requesting from this grant program. The maximum request is $20,000, but you don't have to request that amount. You can request less than that. If, say, you only need $10,000 to finish your project, you can give the specific amount that you need in order to complete your project. Again, the maximum request is $20,000. And then there will be an area for you to describe how you plan to use the Anonymous Was a Woman Environmental Art Grant to support your project. So we ask that you further describe where the total grant request will be used during the grant period, and some guidelines on how you can use the funds. The funds must be spent directly on the completion of the proposed projects. And then all funds must be spent during the grant term. We don't allow retroactive expenses, so it must be expenses incurred throughout August 2026 to August 2027. And no more than 15% of the award can be used for marketing and promotion. And then also, if you have any kind of specific purchases or maybe larger purchases for your project that need expanding upon, you can also use this section to give more detail on where the funds would be going and why that purchase is necessary for your project. Oh, and then I'll just go back. One last thing that will be on the application is the supplemental material section. This is optional, but this section is where you can include maybe more lengthy bios or resumes for you and your collaborators. You can also add in any venue commitment letters or permits, or just anything else that supports your application in that way. But again, this part is optional. Okay, review and selection process. All eligible applications will be reviewed and scored over multiple elimination rounds. For round 1 and 2, panelists will review and score applications independently, and the highest scored applications will then move to the next round. Round 3 is where the panel will meet for a online discussion with the final applications, and ultimately the selected recipients will be made there, and also they will determine the funding allocation as a group. Just to mention that partial funding is a possibility, but recipients will never be awarded less than 50% of their ask. And then all applicants will be notified of the status of their application in August 2026. And then all applications will be reviewed based on 3 evaluation criteria. Those criteria are project clarity and feasibility, environmental impact and community engagement, and creativity and artistic merit. We give more lengthy descriptions on each of these evaluation criteria on our website. We just put the link in the chat. It'll be under review process. So we recommend that you read through those because, again, all the applications will be reviewed based on those evaluation criteria. So it's good to kind of refer back to them as you are filling out your application. And with that, that is the presentation portion of this information session. We wanted to give a good amount of time for questions since we have a lot of people who are here for today's information session. Again, you can be writing in any of your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom. That'll likely be at the bottom of your screen. I already see some coming in. I'll just give a second before I start answering them for you all to write them in. And then if we don't get to your question today, you can also email us at awaw@nifa.org with your question. Also, if you have kind of a specific question that might not be relevant to the full group, you can also send your question in there. We also have lots of information on our website, and we also have a pretty lengthy FAQ on there at the bottom that answers lots of kind of frequently asked questions. So with that, I'll just give it a minute to start reviewing these questions, and then I'll start answering them. Okay. Start answering some of these questions. So our first question is regarding eligibility. I see the lead applicant needs to be a U.S. resident, but wondering if any exceptions are made for Canadians or if fiscal sponsorship is an option. So there are no exceptions for the residency requirement. Lead applicants do need to have residence in the U.S. or U.S. territories at the time of applying. But collaborators could reside in another country, such as Canada. So if you're part of a project and you're outside the US as a collaborator, that is totally fine, but the lead applicant must meet all the eligibility requirements. Okay. In terms of project in progress, What if the environmental/community aspect of the project is in progress, but the artistic aspect is beginning? So that's completely fine as long as you're able to submit at least one in progress work sample from your proposed project and are able to outline 1 to 3 milestones that the project has already completed by the time you're applying. This would be considered in progress. And these work samples can look like anything. They can be rehearsal videos, scripts, outlines, sketches, anything, yeah, from the project that you're proposing. And also, we do know that projects that are applying will be in different stages of development. Some might be earlier on, some might be later on, as long as they are currently in progress, and you're able to reflect that through the at least one work sample, and the milestones. Okay, another eligibility questions. Hi, I live in the Netherlands, but also have a place in the States and am a US citizen. Would it be possible for me to apply? I have an environmental project ongoing in the US. If you have a residence in the US at the time of applying, you would meet this eligibility requirement. If that's the case, please use your US address on the application form because that's what we'll be checking for eligibility. And if you are awarded this grant, you will need to submit a W-9 or W-8 Ben form with your current US address to receive the funds. Okay, we have a question. My project is a feature film script that takes place in Africa. I want to travel there for research and also make a mini documentary about my time there doing research. Will I eventually, which I will eventually use to help fundraise for the film. Is this an acceptable aspect for funding? Yes, as long as you meet all of the lead applicant requirements and the other project requirements, projects taking place anywhere in the world are eligible. So in this case, if your project is taking place in Africa, that's completely eligible, and travel would be an eligible grant expense. Also, your grant expenses can take place outside, can be for things that are taking place outside of the US. Just a question, is the recording of today going to be shared with the attendees? The recording will be posted on NIFA's website on the AWAG page within 1 week of today, and that will be posted on NIFA's YouTube channel and will also have captioning. The question, you mentioned 3 collaborators, but may the collective versus collaborators have more than 3? Yes, a collective can have any number of artists, so you can apply as a collective. If you're applying as a collaboration, we define that as up to 3 artists. Um, so yes, you can apply as either. And one distinction too, if you're applying as an artist collaboration, each individual artist will be listed equally as the grant recipient, if awarded. So they'll just be part of all of the recipient materials and will also be listed as a grant recipient if you're applying as a collaboration. We have a question. Would it be okay to submit a project which would culminate by the beginning of October 2026? Yes, that would be eligible since it's between August 2026 and August 2027, as long as the grant funds are spent between that time. So we wouldn't be able to accept retroactive expenses. So any expenses before August 2026. But yes, if your project culminates earlier on in that term, that's completely fine. Can you submit a screenplay excerpt for a work sample? Yes, we do accept screenplays. If you're submitting a manuscript, we would accept up to 5 pages per work sample. Uh, for work samples, how are you defining a reel? We define a reel or a demo reel as a curated video compilation of an artist's work, often showing short clips from multiple works. So we don't accept reels. Each work sample submitted must represent one single work sample rather than spliced up work submitted within one reel. Question, what if all I have are sketches of the project I'm proposing? Would this work as in progress work samples? Yes, sketches would definitely be an acceptable work sample for the in progress work sample section. Again, some examples of in progress work samples could be sketches, drafts, excerpts, studies, mock-ups, recordings, rough cuts, or any other kind of documentation of your work in development. I have a question. If a collective is applying, can any of the members be enrolled in school or a degree-seeking program? Yes. Again, as long as the lead applicant is not currently enrolled in a degree-seeking program, then other members of the collective could be enrolled in school at the time of applying. The question for the manuscript 5 page limit and the PDF project presentation, is that single spaced or double spaced? We don't have any spacing or font requirements as long as you're not overcrowding and that your work samples are legible for the panel. You can format it in any way you would like. If I'm applying with a film project in development, will a script excerpt fulfill the requirements for a work sample? Would there be a page number limit for that? So yes, if you're applying with a film, you can definitely apply with your script as the in-progress work sample. And if you do so, then the requirement would be 5 pages per work sample. Okay, we have a question. What is the dispersal method and timeline of this grant? That's a good question. So if you receive this grant, 50% of the total grant award will be received once you're notified and are onboarded. So we receive all of your materials. You'll receive 50% of the grant. Then you'll receive 40% of the grant after you submit an interim report. This interim report just notifies us that your public engagement component has been confirmed. And then you'll receive 10% after you submit a final report. And this just shows that your project has been completed or the phase of your project has been completed and that you also had your public engagement. We have a question wondering if support for the artist applying is allowable as a project expense. So yes, definitely. We highly recommend that all artists are paid for their work on projects. So artist fees can definitely be part of your budget. And that can also include yourself as a work sam as a as an artist fee. So definitely make sure that you are compensating yourself and then other artists involved. We have a question. Can you give some examples of public engagement? So really your public engagement can look like anything that brings your project to the public and is free and accessible to attend. This can look like a screening, an exhibition, a performance of your work, maybe a lecture or a presentation or a demonstration of some sort. It can be a panel discussion. It can be a workshop. Uh, it can really look like a lot of different things depending on your project and your medium as well. And then it can be live in person, or it can also be online. If it is online, it must be attended by a live audience. And the only requirement is that you have one public engagement, but you can also do multiple public engagements if that's of interest to you. And they can also take place over multiple days and times. But yes, that's really up to you. Does the applicant need to know or have confirmed the public engagement activity at the time of application? No, you don't need to have any of the details confirmed at the time of applying, but you do need a proposal or an idea for the public engagement. If you do have certain aspects confirmed in the supplemental materials section, which is optional, you might want to include kind of a venue letter of commitment or uh, any kind of documentation that reflects that something has been confirmed, but yes, it's not a requirement that anything be confirmed. And again, we do allow for details to change if you are awarded the grant. We have a question. Can you send the link of the budget spreadsheet? So I think that was sent earlier in the chat, but this can also be found directly at any time in the application under the project budget section. We have both a template for the Google Sheets as well as the Excel version of the template. We have a question. Do you prefer permanent, tangible installations or ephemeral performance-based projects? So there's no preference. Either are completely valid. It's more important that your project has a focus on environmental issues and aims to engage that environmental issue at some scale. And this can, yeah, be in any artistic form. And yeah, there is no preference. We have a question. Could you repeat some of the items that would qualify for approved budget expenses? So any expenses that are needed to complete the project that you're proposing would be eligible as long as they are spent during the grant term. Some exceptions are that no more than 15% of the award can be used for marketing and promotion. And then if you have any kind of ongoing expenses, such as artist or service fees, rentals, or subscriptions, that might go beyond the grant term, we would only accept these expenses during August 2026 through August 2027. So, for example, we wouldn't, if you are asking for maybe studio space, that would be acceptable during the grant term, but beyond that, the funds couldn't go towards those expenses. And then also, if part of the funding is intended to be spent on larger material items or equipment, we recommend kind of expanding on that in the question about how the AWAWEAG funds will be spent, and just maybe explaining on why these purchases are essential to the portion of your project that you're applying with. Another question, is it beneficial to get the application submitted early? So no, there's no necessary benefit, but we do recommend submitting at least before the final day, so at least 24 hours before the grant deadline or earlier, because we do know technical difficulties do come up, especially in those final hours of applying, and we definitely want you to be able to submit if you would like to. So we recommend giving yourself at least a day before the deadline. Another question, work samples of a proposed project. Can it be of a previous phase of the project? Yes, as long as it's from the same overall project, you could definitely submit projects from a previous phase as one of your in-progress work samples. We have a question. What is NYFA's definition of community arts? I'm guessing this is in relation to maybe the question about artistic discipline, since community arts is one of the options. And for NYFA, we define community arts as a socially engaged art that is created and are presented in a public-facing community settings. Examples could include, but are not limited to workshops, festivals, public art installations, or murals. Um, Feel free to email us if you have any other questions on that. Okay, we have 6 more minutes and I'm seeing lots more questions, so I'll try to get through more. But again, if I don't get to yours, please be sure to email us, and we will follow up. Okay, how much weight is given to the CV/past achievements versus the work samples? So work samples are much more important and they will be the primary point of review, definitely over any kind of CV or past achievements. CVs or additional kind of bio information really just provides extra context, but the work samples will definitely be weighed more heavily in the review. And also, this grant program is open to artists of all stages. So you might be more emerging or later on in your career, and both are completely fine. I have a question. Can you please give us some examples of recent projects that have been successful? So we don't have the specific projects up on our website at the moment, but all of the past recipients are listed on the AWAWEAG grant history and recipients page on our website. So you can go see past supported artists, and a lot of them have their websites linked, as well as they might have included what of their work was supported by the AWAWEAG. So we just put that link in the chat if you would like to look at past supported artists. And I do actually believe on that page we have the name of their project listed as well. Okay, do films have to be US based or can they be international? For this first question, US based or international are both acceptable, so your film can really take place anywhere. Does the community engagement aspect have to happen during the grant period or can it happen sooner? For example, July 2026. Um, the public engagement must happen during the grant term. You can have some kind of community engagement happen before then, but for the part of the project that you are applying for this grant for, you must also have a public engagement during the grant period. So you would have to have one from August 2026 through August 2027. We have another question. Can the public engagement be a free event, but offer an option for attendees to give donations that go directly to the community represented in the film? So at least one of your public engagement events must be free, where no one is required to attend. Meaningful donations, kind of as you were describing, so donation link that goes directly to the community represented would be acceptable. Yes. Is there a preference given to projects done by with collaborators instead of projects conducted only by individual artists? There's no preference. You can apply as an individual artist or with collaborators. For a theater performance, would offering free previews and a dress rehearsal be a compelling community engagement component, or should it be a separate event that is tandem with the performances? So that would be acceptable, kind of offering free previews or dress rehearsals, as long as these are open to the public. So if it's just invite-based only, that wouldn't be an acceptable form of the public engagement. It must be open to the public. We have a question. What percentage of the award can be designated as an artist fee and or used for basic living expenses such as rent, food, health insurance, etc., while the project is being completed? So we don't have any specific percentage. You can be putting the AWEAG towards artist fees as much as you'd like. The only requirement is that 15% maximum for marketing and promotion. Okay, and we are exactly at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm here in New York, but thank you all so much for attending. Again, if we didn't get to your question, feel free to reach out to us at awaw@nifa.org, and we'll end today there. Thank you so much for your interest in applying, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you all.